The Federal Reserve is losing money. Not the government it funds, in the printer itself. And almost nobody is saying it out loud. Jerome Powell runs the one institution that can never run out of dollars. Yet since 2022, it has run a loss. A real one. In 2023, the Federal Reserve posted a net loss of $114 billion, the biggest in its history. This is educational market analysis, not financial advice. But stay with this, because the loss lands on your money. Here is the promise. By the time we finish, you will see why the money printer went underwater. And who quietly pays the tab. The central bank that backstops the dollar cannot balance its own books. That should stop you cold. Think about how strange that is. The one place that literally creates money is short of it. That paradox is the whole story. So how does a printer lose money? It sounds impossible. It is not. Picture the plumbing. During the pandemic, the Federal Reserve bought trillions in bonds, treasuries and mortgage bonds. This bond buying has a name, quantitative easing. It simply means the central bank creates money and buys bonds with it. Those bonds were locked at tiny yields, around 1.5%. Cheap money, frozen in place, for years and years. To pay for all of it, banks park cash at the Federal Reserve. That cash is called reserves. Think of it as the bank's checking account. Money funds park cash too, in something called reverse repos, overnight loans backed by government bonds. Add it up and you get a mountain of parked cash. Trillions of dollars, sitting at the central bank, waiting. That cash is a liability. The Federal Reserve owes interest on it. The bonds are the asset, and the two do not match. For years, the Federal Reserve paid almost nothing on that parked cash. It earned more than it paid. Easy profit. Free money, really. Then inflation hit. The Federal Reserve raised rates fast, and that flipped the entire machine. Suddenly, it had to pay banks around 5% on their reserves. But its own bonds still earned only 2%. Pay 5, earn 2. Do that on trillions of dollars, and you bleed. Every single month. That is the trap. Long, cheap assets. Short, expensive debt. The gap between them is the loss. And the Federal Reserve cannot escape it. It cannot sell the bonds without locking in a giant loss. So it holds, and it bleeds. Think of it like a fixed mortgage running the wrong way. You lend at 2, borrow at 5, and the math eats you alive. You are stuck in the loan. You cannot refinance the money you already lent. All you can do is wait for the years to pass. Now the clever part, the accounting trick that hides the wound. A normal company posting a loss this size would wipe out its capital. It might look insolvent. So the Federal Reserve does something else. It records the shortfall as a deferred asset. Read that again. An asset. Translation: it writes itself an IOU. A promise to collect future profit it has not earned yet. A loss, dressed up as an asset, on the books of the people who define money. Let that sink in. If you tried that with your own bank, they would laugh you out of the building. The central bank just books it and moves on. And it is allowed to. There is no law that forces a central bank to hold positive capital. It can run in the red for years. So the loss becomes a line item with a friendly name. The wound is real. The label just makes it look calm. So how big is this IOU? Watch the numbers climb. In early 2023, the deferred asset was about $36 billion. Small, almost a rounding error. By March of 2025, it hit $225 billion. That is not a rounding error anymore. By March of 2026, it reached $244 billion. The hole keeps getting deeper, slowly. That figure comes straight from the Federal Reserve's own balance sheet reports. This is not a critic's guess. It is their own number. Why so deep? One expense line did it. Watch this number. In 2021, the Federal Reserve paid banks about $5 billion in interest on their reserves. Modest. By 2024, that same payment was more than $186 billion in a single year. Read those two numbers together. 5 billion, then 186 billion. That is the whole disease in two figures. That is money flowing from the central bank straight to the biggest banks in America for simply parking cash. Sit with that for a second. The public loses a Treasury check. The banks collect interest on idle reserves. Same policy, two very different outcomes. Picture a landlord who borrows at 5 to hold an apartment, renting for 2. Every month, he loses. He cannot wait out the math. That is the Federal Reserve right now. And here is where it starts touching you. Before all this, the Federal Reserve was a cash machine for the government. It sent its profit to the Treasury every year. That check peaked at $109 billion in 2021. Real money. It helped fund the government. For years, those payments averaged around $90 billion a year. A steady, quiet stream into the Treasury. Then the profit vanished. Those payments have been zero since September of 2022. Zero. For the first time since 1934. And projections say nothing flows again until around 2030. So here is a question. If the government loses a $100 billion revenue line, what does it do? It borrows the difference. It adds to the deficit. At the exact moment, interest on the debt is already exploding. So follow the chain. The Federal Reserve stops paying the Treasury. The Treasury borrows more. The debt grows. The interest bill grows too. One broken payment quietly widens the deficit by $100 billion a year. And most people never even hear about it. There is one more number, and it is the biggest of all. The losses hiding inside the bond pile. On paper, the Federal Reserve's bonds were underwater by more than $1 trillion at the end of 2024. By the end of 2025, that gap eased to about $844 billion as yields dipped. Those losses only disappear if the bonds are held to the very end. That is the bet, keeping the whole thing quiet. So test yourself for a moment. $1 trillion underwater, but only on paper. Is that a crisis or a footnote? The honest answer, it depends entirely on whether the Federal Reserve is ever forced to sell. As long as it holds, the loss stays hidden. But hidden is not the same as gone. The gap is real. It just waits patiently in the background. Now let me come back to Powell, because this is the part he cannot say plainly. The institution built to protect confidence in the dollar is running a loss and papering it over with an IOU to itself. If this channel helps you see the machine behind the headlines, subscribe. It genuinely helps us keep digging. Now, some will say this is fine. And in one narrow sense, they are right. A central bank can lose money and keep working. It cannot go bankrupt the way you or I can. That is true. It creates the very money it owes, so it can always pay its bills. On that point, the calm crowd is correct. But the cost does not vanish. It just moves. It shows up somewhere else, usually on the public tab. And that is the part they skip. Solvency is not the question. Who ends up carrying the bill is the question. Look abroad, and the pattern is clear. Other central banks are in the same hole. Germany's central bank lost about €9 billion in 2025. One of the worst results in its long history. Britain's central bank runs an even blunter version. Its government covers the losses directly, in cash. That bill could reach nearly £230 billion over the coming decade. Straight from taxpayers. America hides the same wound better. The deferred asset means the tab is deferred, not deleted. You still carry it. So the difference is only in the packaging. Britain sends taxpayers a bill. Germany prints the loss into its books. America defers it. But in every case, the money went out the door years ago. And in every case, the public is the one left holding the gap. There is a deeper pattern here. Every era of easy money eventually sends a bill, and someone always pays it. Before quantitative easing, the Federal Reserve made money the boring way. It held higher-yielding bonds and paid almost nothing out. The same policy that flooded the system with cheap money is exactly what turned the printer into a money loser. That is the irony. So what does it all mean for the dollar in your pocket? This is the payoff. The dollar runs on one thing above all: trust. Trust that the people managing it are steady and solvent. Now the manager itself is running a loss and calling that loss an asset. Quietly, year after year. That does not crash the dollar tomorrow, but it chips at the foundation, slowly, like rust on a bridge. And rust is invisible, right up until the structure gives way. No single year does the damage. It is the steady drip that matters. A loss here, a deferred asset there, a missing check every 12 months. Each piece looks small on its own. Stack them together, over years, and the picture starts to change. This is exactly the erosion that pushes big money toward hard assets. Toward things a printer cannot conjure. It is why central banks themselves keep buying gold. Gold has no counterparty. It cannot post a loss. With gold near a stable level around $3,000 an ounce, that quiet buying is the tell that matters. Not because gold changed, because trust in the paper did. Watch what the official buyers do, not what they say. Their words defend the dollar. Their reserves quietly hedge it. That gap between the talk and the buying, that is the real signal. Follow the metal, not the microphone. So watch 3 simple signals. First, the deferred asset. When it stops growing, the bleeding has slowed. Second, the payments to the Treasury. When a real check flows again, the wound has finally healed. Third, central bank gold buying. When the official buyers keep loading up, they are voting against their own paper. They fire in that order. The loss comes first. The healing comes slowly. The trust question comes last. The money printer is underwater. It is paying you nothing, and it is quietly writing itself an IOU for the difference. So here is my question for you. If the printer itself is losing money, who do you trust to protect the dollar? Tell me below.